presentation. It's on the screen, sir.
Okay, so then I'll just say next slide and you can change the slide, right? Sure. So thanks everyone for having me here. It's good to be in a conference where there is a lot of geopolitics along with agribusiness, right? Which is dictating the entire movement of the wheat value chain. So what I will focus on is obviously on how wheat is evolving and the whole opportunity around value addition in wheat. And also very quickly cover some of the other major trends from an agribusiness standpoint. So we can move to the next slide, please. Right, so very quick, agriculture and its value add. Now, sometimes what is important to look at is that we take a lot of this employment for granted, and it impacts a lot of different lives, right? And therefore, if you look at its contribution to GVA, you'll see that in 2021, it's at about 18%. And share of agri in GDP is again increasing. And we will see all of these different segments impacting it, from crops to livestock to fishing and marine, etc. The Indian economy in agriculture is largely dominated by cereals because of the Green Revolution, and therefore we are seeing that things like wheat, for example, is getting pressure from other crops, especially as we diversify from a food pyramid standpoint into horticulture and proteins and all of that, along with a lot of import substitution which is happening in pulses and oilseeds. And hence, food grain production, while it is growing, there is obviously pressure on sustaining some of the traditional crops that we were growing, plus land is getting diverted from agriculture to other products and services and manufacturing and everything else, right? And hence, how do you intensify becomes the important question to answer. And these are some statistics again from a total food grain production leading to cereal production to wheat production. And again, you will see that wheat is one of the largest crops, contributing to about 113 million tons as compared to rice, which is at 136. Yeah, so we can move on. So this is just to very quickly give you a sense about agriculture in India, which is 18%, and wheat, which is 34% of food grains. Next slide, please. And again, from an agricultural standpoint, we see a wide diversity of agroclimatic conditions, and this makes India very attractive from an agri-business standpoint, right? Because we are the largest or the second largest producer of a whole host of commodities. And hence, what implications are there for wheat is to see how, again, wheat can gain from some of this policy focus. We are looking at one district, one crop as something that a lot of state governments are looking at. How can we as an industry take advantage of some of that as we grow and expand? And again, what is the role of procurement in the entire wheat value chain? And while I was entering, I just heard this interesting discussion about allowing imports, exports, etc. Right? And therefore, how can we also move up the value chain, right? We've seen this whole Sharbati revolution and what it's done with atta. Can we also replicate it in other parts of the country and help some of the processors as they grow and expand to also add value to the wheat value chain? Please move to the next slide. We'll come specifically to wheat itself. So this is production trends. Again, very important to look at how production is by and large growing. You might have blips in a few years, but overall growing well. And exports volumes, again, you'll see that it went up and touched a peak in 2022, but has fallen since. But given the whole food security problem in the rest of the world, given Ukraine crisis, etc., this is going to be something which will be very closely looked at by the rest of the world in terms of how much India is producing. And hence, what can we do to also not just look at producing wheat, but also processed wheat products? How do we take it to market? And the other important aspect here is also to look at MSP. And hence, how is it that farmers, there's a lot of innovation happening in the agri value chain. How is it that we are going to help farmers take advantage of some of this and make it more remunerative for them to grow wheat is an important question to be answered. So again, a lot of policy focus on looking at the role of both government regulations on MSP on overall farmer income and prices. Yes, please move on. And regional landscape of wheat, very important to see that the top 3 states, UP, Madhya Pradesh and Punjab, are focusing on wheat as a product. What can we, again, look at each of these different states in terms of both area as well as volume, and how is it that we can at least look at some of the laggards, right? UP is the highest in area, but doesn't really reach the productivity levels of Punjab. So these are the big opportunities in terms of how we can, within the country itself, cross-pollinate between states and regions. And again, from a wheat across states perspective, I did mention different varieties of wheat. One important aspect here is to learn from other sectors, right? Dairy, for example, has moved from the basic pouched milk to a lot of value addition. Similarly, what can we learn from other categories itself, right? How can we extend that to bread and biscuits and various other value-added products as they grow? We're seeing a lot of premiumization in the market from a consumer standpoint. How is it that we're going to benefit this sector specifically? Health and wellness, big consideration. And hence the whole gluten movement, gluten-free movement, how are we going to take advantage of that? These are all important questions to be answered in terms of value addition. And also ready to cook, ready to eat. We saw post the pandemic a lot of focus on looking at convenience, right? And hence a lot of different companies are looking at staples, packaged staples for branding. They're looking at diversifying into the wheat value chain. I know of specifically of quite a few dairy companies, for example, which are looking at extending into wheat. So these are all opportunities that are there, but value addition is really critical. And a lot of this is at a state government level. So how do you also engage with different state governments, which are obviously offering a lot of incentives for you to grow and expand in those states? But how do you engage with a farmer? How do you build this entire technology-led agricultural innovation, which will help you engage directly with farmers and source more efficiently, right? So these are all some important areas to be considered as we look at varieties in different parts of the wheat value chain, grow and expand in different states. Yeah, and now I'll move to the last slide, which will kind of set the stage for the discussion going forward in terms of wheat processing. So you will see that the light green box that you're seeing there, wheat plays a small role in the amount that it gets processed. A lot of it is around consuming wheat in very basic primary processed form. Right? Now, how do you also move up the value chain and do more tertiary processing, more value-added products is an important area. The second is milling capacity itself. Right? In food, for example, we are seeing a lot of localization. There are these cuisine clusters which vary every 50 to 100 kilometers. ITC is obviously here and other atta companies are here. They'll talk about how some of their products themselves vary as we move to different regions. So how is it that we are going to bring in that localization, right, in terms of what that particular region needs is an important part, because food is all about taste and it's not very easy to change taste preferences very quickly, right? And hence adapting to these local conditions and therefore distributed milling, right? You might have advantages of scale and in terms of processing at a central level, but many times you'll see closer to the market, you're able to customize and adapt better, right? And hence, how is your supply chain network going to look and how is it that you're going to do a lot of decentralized supply chain is also a critical area to focus on. Beyond all of this, like I said, there is value addition in terms of starch, in terms of malt, in terms of dextrose, gluten, alcohol itself. A lot of agribusiness these days is also looking at sustainable operations, and therefore, how do you look at agri waste and become more sustainable from that? These are all supply chain considerations. Plus, of course, there are various different challenges. Awareness levels on, for example, alternative grains in terms of gluten-free, etc. There is a lot of awareness building which needs to happen. There is a lot of milling which is outdated. So how do you bring in more modernization in the sector? How do you work with some of the large food processing equipment players to modernize the sector? Adequate storage, another big challenge, the amount of wastage, etc. So how do you also address these issues of the value chain where post-harvest losses can be minimized? And finally, what are we going to do with all the inefficiency in the supply chain, right? There are numerous levels of intermediation. How do you look at taking advantage of some of these agtech companies now which are there in the front end, directly connected to the consumer? They're procuring wheat. How can you take advantage of some of these different innovations which are happening from a technology standpoint? So with that, I will pause. And you can see that it's expected to reach 546 billion, which is a big number, and therefore that's the big opportunity when it comes to processed wheat, which can be looked at as a market for growth for everybody in this room. So thank you so much. Over to the next speaker.